I remember when me and this girl ended up going to my teacher's house. No joke. This girl ends up walking around the place and starts putting things in her bag that did not belong to her. I started to look at her really confused until she told me, "But wait, you do realize he's failed us as a teacher, right? So why in the world should he have all this? These are now gonna belong to me." And I was so lost, but at the same time, did I just witness the girl that I was hanging out with robbing our own teacher? Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name's Bubba, and welcome back to another crazy but embarrassing story. So today's story all takes place back in high school, my grade 11 year. Now in grade 11, I remember I took a class called Astronomy, where basically you would learn about the stars in the sky and stuff. And honestly, like, I thought astronomy was gonna be really fun and cool to learn about the planets, until I realized in that classroom when I walked in there weren't a lot of students willing to learn about it. But the students that were there, well, they were kind of weird. And the reason I say they were weird is because all of them were like blue-haired girls that like believed in zodiac signs. And there was one girl in there specifically that I realized was a major disaster, because this girl was like the ultimate emo girl. And I'm not saying there's anything bad with emo girls. It's just back then, being emo led to a lot of, well, self-hatred, and honestly, being around them just changed the whole aura of the classroom. But I remember I went and sat in there for my first class, and basically our teacher ended up walking up front of the classroom, and he was actually a scientist. So the hopes and dreams of all these girls learning about zodiac signs and how, you know, basically what year you're born in changes like the way you feel is the last thing we're going to be learning about. We're going to be learning about the actual stars and the actual planets that we were supposed to learn. I didn't mind it whatsoever. Once again, I knew going into that class I'd be learning about the stars. But as for everyone else in that classroom, well, they all got pretty upset. It even got to the point where after the first day, a lot of people ended up going to their counselors wanting to change their class. But sadly, at this moment in time, all the other classrooms were full. So anyways, as weeks went on, me and all these random weirdos, I'm gonna call them, went to this classroom. And every time we go in there, we learn about, you know, specific different things. But then there was one time specifically I remember where I went inside that classroom, we sat down. And when class started, I remember my teacher started explaining to us, "Okay, class, so today we're gonna be learning about the science of the yearly transition of how the earth spins." And then that's when one of the girls ended up putting up their hand saying, "Oh, like, don't you mean like what year the zodiac was on there and like what year they represent as the earth was in that turn?" What are you talking about zodiacs? Zodiacs have nothing to do with science whatsoever. At that moment, I remember a lot of girls started getting upset, and the whole room ended up starting to become a debate club. They were yelling back and forth with the teacher, and it got to the point where things got really out of hand. And I remember it got to the point where the emo girl even decided to stand up, and she just started yelling really, really loud. She just started screaming nonstop to the point where her lungs needed a break. And me, I was just covering my ears going, "Bro, this is so dumb. Why is this happening right now? This is so dumb." And I was so annoyed to the point where I just stood up and left the classroom. If I'm being honest, I just did not want to be in a classroom full of conflict, and it was just not worth it because I wasn't learning anything. And I'm sure none of this debate was going to be on the test. But then I remember when I walked out of the classroom, the emo girl ended up also coming out with me. And me and her, we ended up basically walking out of there together, and we ended up going to the cafeteria to line up for lunch early. I remember as we're in the lineup for the cafeteria, she ends up looking at me and she's like, "Yeah, I guess me and you had the same thought. Honestly, like, I'm so done with like dumb rich teachers." Wait, what? Rich? What do you mean rich? Bubba, like, don't you know he's like a great scientist that like apparently like gets paid a lot through like NASA and stuff? Oh, no, I didn't know that. I thought he was just another teacher. No, apparently he's like super loaded, and like honestly, like, I just hate his guts because he's so naive in his scientific ways. He's not like able to put an understanding for like us like zodiacs. I was so confused what she was talking about. But I remember me and her ended up getting food, and we ended up sitting down together, and she kept telling me about like, you know, who he was, and even pulled out her phone and showed me his website that he had. And this guy was actually apparently a really big deal. I didn't really care too much, honestly. Like, good for him. Man made his bag through science. W, you know what I mean? Like, that's cool in my opinion. But then as me and her were eating, I remember the teacher, the scientist, ended up seeing us sitting in the cafeteria. And he walks up to me and this girl and says, "You two do realize leaving my classroom early without me knowing leads to both of you guys failing, right?" Wait, what is what I said? And even the girl was in shock, and she's like, "Wait, what? You're gonna fail us because we weren't a part of some dumb argument?" Arguments are what make the world spin. It's what makes people connect better in finding a middle ground. But you guys weren't there for that, and you guys wouldn't fight for that. So honestly, you guys failed. And that's when he ends up walking away. I remember me and this girl were really annoyed, and this girl, for some reason, she looks at me and she notices I'm pissed off. And that's when she says to me, "Honestly, Bubba, I have an idea." And that's when she ends up grabbing my phone, putting down her number, and she ends up shooting me a message of her name. I was really confused why she needed my number, but I didn't really care. At that moment, I only cared cared about not failing. And I was even debating after school to go up to him and basically talk to him about how, like, you know, I apologize and please don't fail me. So I remember as the day went on, after school finally came around, and at that moment I decided to make my choice to actually go up and see him. And as I was walking towards my astrology class, I remember this girl, she ends up seeing me walking towards the classroom after school, and she grabs me by the shoulder and says, Baba, stop, wait, don't go in there. What? Why not? I don't want to fail. Baba, you won't fail. You gotta make a better gesture than that, you know what I mean? Like, we can't let him push us around like that. So I have a great idea, just follow me. At that moment, me and her, we ended up going to the parking lot, and we ended up getting inside my car, and we went for a drive. Honestly, me hanging out with this emo girl was never the plan I really wanted to do, but I mean, she apparently had a better idea that wouldn't make us fail, so I wanted to see what it was. And well, one thing led to another. I remember as we were sitting in the parking lot at the mall, she ends up pulling out her phone once again after a couple hours went by, and she ends up putting down a GPS location that I had no idea where it led to. I even looked at her and said, wait, where does this lead to? Baba, you'll see, trust me. My idea is perfect. It'll show him not to mess with us. Wait, what? What do you mean not mess with us? At that moment, I was really confused, but at the same time, I wanted to see what was gonna happen. So I ended up driving her to this location, and when we got there, we ended up pulling up to a giant house. Now this house was like an awesome mansion, and it looked really, really cool. And I remember as me and her, we ended up parking the car, and as we got out to the front door, that's when she says to me, see, Baba, like, look, he's so loaded, and he has the audacity to fail us. Wait, what? Wait, whose house is this? Is this not your house? What? No, you think I'm rich like this? Seriously? Ew. No, I could never be a millionaire. They're all snarky, rude, and they don't care about other people's feelings. I remember her after saying all that, I was just so confused on where we were, and I remember this girl ends up opening a window at the house, and she ends up just crawling in there. And me, I ended up following behind her because I didn't want her going in there by herself. Who knows who's in there? But as me and her went in there, I remember we ended up walking around, and I realized this was the house of my teacher, which made sense why she was talking about revenge. But honestly, I was just so like not in the mood, because think about it, my whole day was just totally ruined from just a debate to failing my class and now breaking and entering my teacher's house. Like, I didn't know what to think. And then I remember I kept telling this girl, yo, this is breaking and entering. We cannot be here right now. Like, we gotta get out of here before he comes back. And that's when this girl ends up looking at me and saying, Baba, I think I know what I'm doing, and I just found the jackpot. Wait, what do you mean you found the jackpot? I remember I walked up beside her and I saw she ended up looking at this rock that was on display. Now this rock was just some ordinary rock to me, but when I looked at the title that was engraved on like this gold palette, it ended up saying moon rock. And that's when I realized my teacher had a piece of the moon. Now I didn't want to touch it, nothing, because I didn't know if it was gonna like turn into dust in my hands, but this girl, she straight up grabs it and puts it in her bag. And that's when she says, see, this is what he gets for failing me. And that's when she gets this rock, puts it right in her bag, and we end up leaving. We got in my car and drove away as quick as possible. I even remember as we were driving away, my car ended up actually passing by his car, which was super scary because if he recognized me, I would have been in major trouble. But anyways, I remember I ended up driving this girl back home, and I ended up driving back home as well, and I thought this was all a big mistake. I remember that entire night, I didn't even get to sleep because I knew that I did something majorly illegal. Now, there was one of two ways I could have handled things. One, I could have called my teacher and told him how this girl stole his rock, but at the same time, he would know that I was there since, you know, how else would I know that this girl stole the rock? But two, I could also call the cops and say who stole the rock and make it seem anonymous. These two ideas were great ideas, don't get me wrong, but I was just so terrified and not knowing what to do until the next day of school finally came around. Now, knowing I was walking around knowing that I just robbed my teacher really freaked me out, but as I was walking in the hallway in the morning, I remember I ended up seeing the emo girl once again. I walked up to her and I said, yo, like, I think we should put the rock back. Like, I think we should, like, you know, maybe just give it back to him, you know, not making that big of a deal. Like, who cares if he fails us? It's just one class. Baba, it's our grade 12 year. He failed us in one dumb class. Like, seriously? It's fine. And that's when this girl pulls out the moon rock and she ends up putting it inside her locker. Now, me, I was just in my mind still freaking out every minute of this. Like, you guys have no idea. And then I remember me and this girl, we ended up leaving and going back into the classroom. When we went back into the astrology class, I remember we sat down and my teacher walked in very upset. He was so mad because he knew that someone stole his moon rock, and he walks in front of the classroom saying, okay, class, so today we're going to be learning about something brand new, and it's called stealing. Okay, stealing is not appropriate in any way, shape, or form. And I don't care about little zodiac or the way you feel or what year it is. Stealing's never one of those years. I remember everyone just starts looking around totally confused on what this teacher was yapping about, but me and this emo girl knew exactly. And that's when I start panicking because I didn't know what he was gonna do. But I remember this teacher stands in front of the classroom and he says, you know what, if you guys don't want to speak up in terms of stealing my rock, I'm gonna do this. If that rock doesn't come back to me in the next 24 hours. I will call the police. I'll make sure all of you guys are suspects. And on top of that, I'll make sure everyone fails this class. No matter how much work you do, you will fail. At that moment, people were freaking out in the classroom. Everyone was getting upset. Everyone started yelling at each other instead of yelling at the teacher because, well, to be fair, he had every right to be upset because someone stole his rock, which was the emo girl, but still, like, was it really going to get to that point? At that moment, I remember after class ended that day, I ended up walking up to the emo girl, basically begging her to give him the rock back and just move on from this. But this girl would not budge. She was so set in her ways to the point where I remember I was just walking with her to her locker, and as she was putting the combination down to open her locker, she was just yapping to me about like every little thing, but I watched every single number that she put down for her locker, and I remembered it because I remember as she ended up going away and going home, I ended up staying at school for another hour, and I ended up going to this emo girl's locker, opening the lock, and I pulled out the moon rock. I ended up putting it in my backpack, and I remember the next day in the morning, I ended up going straight to my teacher, and I ended up giving it to him. I remember when he got it, he looked at me and said, "Ha, I knew someone had it, and I knew you stole it. Why would you steal my moon rock? Tell me, Bubba, what is the reason for this?" Honestly, I didn't steal the moon rock. I know where it was because I was told where it was, and right now the person that actually stole it don't know that I stole it back, but I'm giving it back to you. Just please lay off the classroom. Like, it's not worth it. At that moment, this teacher ended up, you know, making me write down names of like, you know, who was involved with the situation, and I ended up writing down the whole entire essay of what happened, and since I did, I ended up passing the class. But still, I'm not gonna lie, snitches get stitches. Don't do what I do, and don't rob your teacher because it never ends up well. But if you guys have ever robbed someone or even said something bad to your teacher, then follow for more embarrassing stories just like this one. Peace out, guys.